They say the dead tell no tales, but I'm about to prove them wrong. Right now, my body lies cold in the city morgue while my sister slips into my old wedding dress, preparing to marry the man I loved. My family didn't even wait for rigor mortis to set in before proceeding with their perfect day. The wedding venue sparkles with fairy lights and white roses, but none of the guests know they're celebrating on the day of my death. Mother fusses over my sister's hair while my ex-boyfriend practices his vows in front of a mirror, neither of them showing a shred of grief for my passing. I drift between them as a spirit, invisible yet ever-present, watching the ultimate betrayal unfold. The irony isn't lost on me that the date they chose for their wedding marks the anniversary of my beloved grandmother's death, the only person who ever truly loved me in this family. For years, I carried their secrets, paid their debts, and swallowed their abuse, believing I could earn their love. This morning, I thought my final act would force them to acknowledge my pain. Instead, they simply stepped over my memory like they always did when I was alive. But death has given me something life never did: the power to expose every dark truth they tried to bury. Today, I'll make sure everyone witnesses the real story behind this wedding, even if I have to tear down heaven and earth to do it. Before we start this journey together, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The wedding march echoes through the chapel as I hover near the crystal chandelier, watching my sister Rachel walk down the aisle in my wedding dress. My body has been in the morgue for exactly 6 hours and 43 minutes, yet here they all are, celebrating as if I never existed. The dress hugs her frame perfectly, just as it did mine when I first tried it on 3 months ago. Mother had insisted I help with the wedding preparations, claiming it would help me find closure. What better way to prove my growth, she said, than to ensure my sister had her perfect day. The guests fill every pew, their faces glowing with joy as Rachel floats past them. None of them know about the body in the city morgue, or how my family rushed to hide all evidence of my existence before opening the chapel doors. My death was an inconvenience they needed to sweep under the rug, just like every other imperfection I represented in their lives. I drift down closer to the altar where James stands waiting for his bride. My ex-boyfriend, the man I thought would be my future, now preparing to pledge his life to my sister. His hands are steady as he watches Rachel approach, no sign of the trembling I remember from our own private moments. When he smiles, it reaches his eyes in a way it never did with me. Mother sits in the front row, her designer dress immaculate and her makeup perfect despite the morning's chaos. She dabs at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, playing the role of emotional mother of the bride. Those tears are for show, just like the ones she shed when she found my body. They dried up the moment she realized the wedding could still proceed on schedule. The morning replays in my mind as I watch the ceremony unfold. I had chosen my timing carefully, knowing they would find me just early enough to make a decision. Part of me had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that my death would finally force them to acknowledge my pain. Instead, Mother had simply closed my bedroom door, called her cleanup crew, and proceeded with her meticulous wedding day schedule. From my new vantage point, I can see every detail I missed in life. The way Rachel's fingers twitch slightly when she takes James's hands, betraying her nervousness not about the wedding, but about discovery. The slight tensing in Mother's jaw when the priest asks if anyone objects to this union, the knowing glances between various family members who helped orchestrate this perfect facade. I drift among the guests, recognizing faces from my own life story. There's Aunt Patricia, who always compared Rachel and me at family gatherings, making sure I understood I was the lesser sister. Uncle Robert, who managed the family trust and mysteriously found reasons to deny my every request while funding Rachel's dreams. Even my childhood friends, now Rachel's loyal supporters, sit among the crowd. Their betrayal complete, the irony of the date doesn't escape me. 2 years ago to the day, I held my grandmother's hand as she took her last breath. She was the only one who saw through the family's perfect veneer, the only one who tried to protect me from their subtle cruelty. Mother had known this when she selected the wedding date. Another calculated dig at the connection I shared with the one person who truly loved me. White roses fill every corner of the chapel, their scent overwhelming even in my spectral form. They had been my choice originally, selected months ago when James and I were still planning our own future. Rachel had kept them in the arrangements, claiming she had always loved white roses, Just another piece of my life she felt entitled to claim as her own. The priest begins the ceremony, his words about love and devotion ringing hollow in the space between life and death. I watch as James recites his vows, the same ones he once practiced in front of me. Rachel responds with perfectly rehearsed sincerity, her voice carrying to the rafters where I hover. The gold band he slides onto her finger catches the light, drawing my attention to her hands. Hands that had so often pushed me aside, torn up my drawings as children, and finally reached out to take the one person I thought was mine alone. As the priest pronounces them husband and wife, I feel a shift in the air. The candles flicker briefly, and several guests shiver despite the warm spring day. Mother's eyes dart around the chapel, some deep-buried instinct sensing my presence. For a moment, her perfectly composed facade cracks, showing a glimpse of the guilt she carries. But she recovers quickly, rising to applaud the happy couple with practiced enthusiasm. The wedding party begins their procession out of the chapel, and I follow, drawn by an invisible thread to this family that never truly claimed me. In life, I had fought so hard for their approval, their love, their basic acknowledgement of my worth. Now, in death, I find myself uniquely positioned to witness their true nature. Through the grand doors they go, out into the sunlight that should have illuminated my own wedding day. The guests shower the couple with rice and rose petals, their joyful faces oblivious to the dark undertones of this celebration. I remain behind in the chapel, watching the last stragglers file out. In the emptiness, I can finally feel the weight of what's to come. This wedding is only the beginning. As a spirit tethered to this family by bonds stronger than death, I will witness every consequence of their choices. Every crack in their perfect facade, every moment of guilt that surfaces in the dark of night, every realization of what they've done. They thought they could bury my story along with my body, but they forgot one crucial detail. The dead have nothing left to lose, and all of eternity to ensure the truth comes to light. 3 months earlier, I sat at our family's mahogany dining table, the same one where we had celebrated countless milestones and weathered innumerable storms. Mother had called an impromptu family dinner, insisting everyone attend. The crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier light, a pristine setting that would soon frame my world's collapse. Rachel entered last, as always, making her signature grand entrance. But this time, James followed behind her. My James, who had canceled our dinner plans that evening with a vague excuse about work. Their fingers were intertwined, and I felt my stomach drop before either of them spoke a word. Mother beamed from her place at the head of the table, raising her wineglass with practiced elegance. "Everyone, I have wonderful news. Rachel and James are engaged." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable driving deeper into my chest. James, who had been my boyfriend for 3 years, who had whispered promises of forever under starlit skies, stood beside my sister with his arm around her waist. I remember how the silverware trembled in my hand, the gentle clink against fine china betraying my shock. Rachel's engagement ring caught the light, and I recognized it immediately. It was our grandmother's ring, the one Mother had promised to me on my 21st birthday. Another inheritance stolen, another promise broken. "We want a spring wedding," Rachel announced, her voice carrying that familiar note of authority that brooked no argument. 3 months should be enough time to plan everything perfectly. Her eyes met mine across the table, challenging me to object, to make a scene, to give her another reason to paint me as the difficult daughter. Mother immediately launched into planning mode, her iPad appearing as if by magic. "Darling, we need to decide on venues immediately. And of course, Elizabeth will help with all the arrangements. She has such an eye for detail when she applies herself properly." The familiar backhanded compliment stung, but not as much as the assumption that I would help plan my own replacement. That evening marked the beginning of my systematic erasure. Every day brought new demands, new ways to prove my devotion to family harmony. Mother insisted I help Rachel try on wedding dresses, standing in the bridal boutique where I had once imagined my own special day. I watched my sister parade in gown after gown until she finally selected the exact dress I had shown Mother months ago. The date they chose was no accident. 2 years earlier, I had spent that same spring day holding my grandmother's hand in the hospice, listening to her labored breathing as she slipped away. She had been my refuge, the only one who saw past Rachel's golden child status to love me for who I was. Even in her final moments, she had tried to warn me about the family's true nature. "The wedding date is perfect," Mother declared during one of our endless planning sessions. "It will give new meaning to a day that has held such sadness." She didn't look at me as she said it, focused on her color swatches and seating charts. The deliberate cruelty of choosing my grandmother's death anniversary for Rachel's wedding went unacknowledged, like so many other small wounds they had inflicted over the years. James avoided me during the planning, always ensuring Rachel or Mother was present when we had to interact. I caught him once, alone in the garden where we had shared our first kiss, and demanded an explanation. His response was rehearsed, delivered with the same smooth charm that had once won my heart. "Elizabeth, you must understand. Rachel and I, we share a connection that transcends ordinary relationships. What you and I had was special, but this is meant to be." He spoke as if our 3 years together had been nothing more than a pleasant diversion, a stepping stone to his true destiny with my sister. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of wedding preparations and carefully maintained appearances. I moved through each day like an automaton, helping select flowers, tasting cakes, addressing invitations. Mother praised my composure to anyone who would listen, holding me up as an example of maturity and family dedication. Behind closed doors, the pressure mounted. Rachel became increasingly demanding, requiring my presence at every decision, every fitting, every rehearsal. She claimed it was because she valued my opinion, but I saw the gleam in her eyes when each new choice echoed my own abandoned wedding plans. The family fell into formation around them, aunts and uncles praising their perfect match, cousins jockeying for positions in the wedding party. No one mentioned the previous relationship between James and me, as if those years could be erased as easily as changing a Facebook status. Mother threw herself into creating the perfect wedding, sparing no expense. The same expenses she had deemed excessive when I had suggested them for my own wedding were now necessary traditions. She hired the top wedding planner in the city, the same one who had been too extravagant for my budget. The invitations went out, cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering announcing the joyous union. I helped stuff the envelopes, my fingers trembling as I sealed away my own hopes with each carefully pressed edge. The guest list included everyone who had once congratulated me on my relationship with James, who had attended our housewarming, who had witnessed our love story unfold. One evening, while reviewing the seating arrangements, I found my grandmother's journal hidden among old family photos. Her elegant handwriting filled pages with observations about our family dynamics, predictions about Rachel's manipulative nature, and concerns for my future. The entry from the day before she died struck me hardest. "My dear Elizabeth, I fear I leave you unprotected among wolves in sheep's clothing." The final weeks before the wedding brought increased scrutiny of my behavior. Mother monitored my every interaction, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of discord. Rachel paraded her happiness through every family gathering, her voice carrying across rooms as she detailed her future plans with James. Plans that had once been mine, dreams we had shared, now repurposed for her perfect day. I maintained my composure through it all, playing my assigned role of supportive sister with Oscar-worthy precision. But each night, alone in my room, I would read my grandmother's journal, finding strength in her words and clarity in her warnings. She had seen through our family's facade, recognized the pattern of favoritism and manipulation that had shaped our lives. The wedding preparations consumed every aspect of our lives. The house filled with deliveries, samples, and consultants, each new arrival seemed designed to remind me of what I had lost. The florist brought white roses, my favorite flower, now designated for Rachel's bouquet. The baker prepared a tasting of chocolate raspberry cake, the flavor James and I had chosen together. Through it all, I watched my sister revel in her triumph. She would catch my eye across rooms, her smile holding secrets and satisfaction. Mother orchestrated every detail with military precision, ensuring the perfect backdrop for Rachel's crowning achievement. The family closed ranks around them, a protective circle that had never included me. In quiet moments, I would find myself in the garden, seeking solace among the flowers my grandmother had planted. Her presence lingered there, in the careful arrangement of blooms and the stone bench where she had listened to my childhood troubles. As the wedding date approached, I felt her absence more keenly than ever, missing the one person who would have stood against this charade. The final fitting for Rachel's wedding dress, my wedding dress, took place exactly 1 week before the ceremony. Standing in the bridal salon, watching her admire her reflection, I made my decision. The path forward became clear, illuminated by years of accumulated pain and the weight of my grandmother's warnings. The perfect spring wedding would proceed as planned, but not quite as they had envisioned. I would ensure that my presence, or rather my absence, would cast a shadow over their carefully choreographed celebration. My grandmother had taught me that sometimes the greatest power lies in refusing to play the role assigned to you. As I helped Rachel out of my dream dress for the last time, I smiled, knowing that soon I would orchestrate my own final act in this family drama. They had written me out of their perfect narrative, but I would make sure my exit would be impossible to ignore. Throughout my childhood, Mother crafted Rachel into her masterpiece while I served as the perpetual understudy. Every achievement of mine existed only in relation to my sister's brilliance. When I earned straight A's, Mother would remind me how Rachel had also earned perfect grades while managing the student council and cheerleading. My violin recitals were scheduled early in the program, clearing the stage for Rachel's show-stopping piano performances. Financial sacrifices became my inheritance. At 18, I started working at Father's company, my salary discreetly channeled into family expenses. Rachel pursued her dreams of fashion design in Paris, her tuition and lifestyle subsidized by my overtime hours and deferred ambitions. Mother called it family duty, reminding me that my practical nature made me better suited for supporting roles. The pattern continued into adulthood. When I bought my first car, a sensible used sedan, Mother suggested I add Rachel to the insurance. Soon my sister was borrowing it more than I drove it, returning it with empty tanks and mysterious scratches. The repairs came from my account, while Rachel's shopping sprees continued uninterrupted. Even my apartment, a modest one-bedroom I had saved for years to afford, became another resource for Rachel to exploit. She would appear unannounced, claiming sanctuary from roommate drama or creative blocks. Days turned into weeks, her presence expanding until I felt like a guest in my own space. My groceries vanished, my schedule adapted to her needs, my life orbiting her convenience. James entered my life during one of Rachel's extended stays at my apartment. He came to fix the heating system she had somehow broken, and for once, something meant for Rachel became mine. We connected over coffee after he finished the repairs, his genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings almost foreign after years of existing in Rachel's shadow. Our relationship bloomed in secret corners and stolen moments. I kept it from my family for months, treasuring something that was purely mine. When Mother finally discovered us, her reaction surprised me. Instead of her usual dismissal of my choices, she showed unexpected enthusiasm. Now I understand she was already calculating, seeing paths and possibilities I couldn't imagine. The family dynamic shifted subtly after James and I went public. Rachel began appearing at more family dinners, arriving late but making grand entrances. She would position herself across from James, engaging him in lengthy discussions about art and culture. I watched their interactions with growing unease, but Mother assured me I was being paranoid, overly sensitive as usual. My role as family support system intensified during those years with James. Mother's spending grew more extravagant, with Rachel's needs always taking priority. When Father's company faced a downturn, I liquidated my modest savings to help cover expenses. The money I had set aside for potential graduate school vanished into the family's black hole of financial need. Each time I considered breaking free from the pattern, Mother would remind me of family loyalty. She wielded guilt like a master sculptor, shaping my compliance with references to sacrifices made for my benefit. My childhood medical bills, the braces I needed, the tutoring for my struggling math grades, all became weapons in her arsenal of emotional manipulation. Rachel mastered Mother's techniques, adding her own flourishes. She would praise herself as the lucky beneficiary of my generous nature. The narrative she created made it impossible for me to object without appearing petty and jealous. In public, I was the noble sister, while in private, I remained the family workhorse. The family home became a stage for their performances. Holiday gatherings featured Rachel's accomplishments, her latest designs, her growing social circle. My contributions were practical, silent labors that kept the machinery running. I cooked, cleaned, managed schedules, and paid bills, While Rachel entertained and Mother directed the show, Grandmother alone saw through the charade. During her final years, she would catch my eye across the dinner table, her gaze full of understanding and sorrow. She tried to arm me with quiet wisdom, teaching me to recognize manipulation tactics and emotional abuse. But her lessons came too late to break patterns set in childhood concrete. On her deathbed, Grandmother attempted one last intervention. She requested a private moment with Mother, their conversation hidden behind closed doors. Whatever was said in that room changed nothing. If anything, Mother's grip on family control tightened after Grandmother's passing, as if determined to erase any influence that might have disrupted her careful orchestration. The engagement marked the ultimate triumph of their system. Everything I had built with James, every genuine moment and shared dream, became retroactively part of their grand design. Mother revealed how she had guided events, subtly encouraging James's career choices that put him in Rachel's orbit, orchestrating encounters that seemed spontaneous. My financial contributions to the family reached new heights during the engagement period. Mother's vision for Rachel's perfect wedding required resources beyond their means. My credit cards stretched to their limits, funding deposits and down payments. Each transaction felt like purchasing my own erasure, investing in the ceremony that would solidify my replacement. The facade they presented to the world never cracked. Society columns praised the upcoming union, describing Rachel as the devoted sister graciously sharing wedding planning duties with her supportive sibling. Photos showed us in carefully composed harmony, my forced smile interpreted as joy, my rigid posture read as dignity. Behind the scenes, the reality turned increasingly bitter. Rachel's demands escalated, each new requirement designed to test my breaking point. She would change decisions at the last minute, requiring deposits to be forfeited and new ones placed. Mother backed every change, dismissing my concerns about mounting costs. The family's true colors showed most vividly in quiet moments. I overheard conversations not meant for my ears, discussions of how to handle my inevitable breakdown. They planned responses to various scenarios, prepared statements for damage control. My pain was not a concern, only the potential impact on their perfect narrative. James's transformation proved the most painful to witness. The man who had once cherished my thoughts and dreams became a willing participant in their performance. He adopted their dismissive tone, their way of talking about me rather than to me. My presence became an inconvenience to be managed, a complication in their love story. The weight of pretense grew heavier as the wedding approached. Each family gathering became an exercise in emotional endurance. Relatives who had witnessed my relationship with James now praised his perfect match with Rachel, their memories seemingly revised to erase my role in his life. Mother's careful curation of family history reached new heights. Photos of James and me disappeared from albums, replaced by artfully staged shots of him with Rachel. Stories were retold with subtle alterations, placing Rachel at events where I had been present, crediting her with choices and ideas that had been mine. The family's financial dependence on me remained their best-kept secret. Even as they planned an extravagant wedding, the truth of its funding stayed hidden. My overtime hours, my deferred dreams, my drained accounts all disappeared into the narrative of family generosity and Rachel's good fortune. My grandmother's journal became my sanctuary during these months. Her clear-eyed observations of family dynamics provided validation I desperately needed. She had documented years of subtle manipulation, recording instances of gaslighting and emotional abuse that I had normalized. Through her words, I found clarity about my position in the family structure. The perfect daughter they wanted never existed. She was a composite of expectations and demands, a role I could never fill because it was designed for failure. Rachel succeeded not through superior qualities but through careful cultivation. Every opportunity given to her was built on opportunities denied to me. In death, my grandmother left me her final gift, permission to break free from their narrative. Her journal entries spoke of courage and self-preservation, of recognizing when sacrifice becomes self-destruction. She understood that some family bonds are actually chains, and that breaking them requires accepting truths too painful for daily acknowledgement. The clarity arrived gradually, like dawn breaking over a dark landscape. Each new slight, each dismissal, each revision of history added another piece to the puzzle. The picture they revealed showed not a family but a carefully constructed system of control. with Mother as architect and Rachel as crown jewel. Their perfect facade required my compliance, my silent acceptance of their version of reality. Every role they assigned me, from supportive sister to family backbone, served their narrative. My death would be their ultimate challenge, the final test of their ability to maintain appearances in the face of undeniable truth. The morning of Rachel's wedding dawned with perfect clarity, sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows in bitter mockery of my plans. I had chosen this day carefully, calculating each detail as meticulously as Mother planned her social events. My letter sat sealed on my desk, words I had drafted and redrafted until each sentence carried the weight of years of unspoken truth. I dressed with deliberate care, selecting the cream silk blouse Mother had always praised, paired with the pearl earrings Grandmother left me. My hands remained steady as I applied my makeup, creating the flawless mask they had always demanded. The pills waited in their orange bottle, lined up like soldiers ready for their final march. The house buzzed with early morning wedding preparations. I could hear Rachel's voice carrying up the stairs, issuing demands to the wedding planners. Mother's heels clicked across marble floors as she orchestrated her perfect production. Neither of them noticed when I failed to appear for the breakfast buffet they had arranged for the bridal party. My bedroom became my final sanctuary. I had spent the previous day removing all traces of myself from the space, knowing how quickly they would work to erase me once it was done. Photo albums were stored in my safety deposit box, along with Grandmother's journal and letters. The evidence of my existence secured where they couldn't reach it. Time moved strangely in those last hours. I watched sunlight crawl across my carpet, listened to the increasing activity downstairs, and felt a peculiar peace settle over me. The weight of their expectations, their judgments, their constant dismissal of my worth began to lift with each pill I swallowed. The pain started gradually, like waves lapping at the shore. I had researched this too, knowing exactly what to expect. My breathing slowed, my vision blurred, and the sounds from downstairs became increasingly distant. As consciousness began to fade, I heard Mother calling my name, irritation clear in her voice. She needed her reliable daughter for some task or another. My last conscious thought was of Grandmother, wondering if she would be disappointed in my choice. The darkness took me before I could find an answer. The transition happened between one breath and the next. One moment I was lying on my bed, the world growing dim, and the next I was standing beside my own body, watching Mother shake my shoulders with increasing desperation. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she checked for a pulse she wouldn't find. Rachel appeared in the doorway, already dressed in my wedding gown, her face contorting with something between shock and annoyance. She lingered at the threshold, unwilling to step fully into the room where death had made its home. The pristine white fabric of her dress, my dress, seemed to glow in the morning light. Mother recovered first, her society training taking over as she assessed the situation. She pulled out her phone, but instead of calling emergency services, she dialed a private number. Her voice remained steady as she arranged for discreet removal of my body, years of managing family crises evident in her efficient tone. I watched them handle my death like any other inconvenience. A spilled drink at a garden party, a rain shower during an outdoor event. Mother's primary concern focused on keeping the situation contained, preventing any disruption to Rachel's perfect day. My sister retreated downstairs, claiming she needed to check on the flowers while Mother managed this unfortunate development. The cleanup crew arrived within 30 minutes, professionals who specialized in handling wealthy families' indiscretions. They removed my body with practiced efficiency, leaving no trace of what had occurred. Mother supervised their work, directing them to take certain items, might raise questions. Ensuring my spirit form could only observe as they stripped my bed, removed my personal belongings, and efficiently erased all evidence of my final moments. Mother checked her watch repeatedly, calculating how this delay would impact her carefully planned schedule. The letter I had left remained unopened on my desk, and I watched her slip it into her purse without reading it. The transformation of my room into a generic guest space happened with frightening speed. Within an hour, fresh linens adorned the bed, generic artwork hung on the walls, and all traces of my existence disappeared into carefully packed boxes. Mother made one final sweep of the space before closing the door, already rehearsing the story she would tell about my absence. Downstairs, the wedding preparations continued unabated. Florists arranged centerpieces, caterers set up serving stations, and musicians began their sound checks. Rachel had recovered from her initial shock and now directed the activities with renewed enthusiasm, as if determined to prove nothing could overshadow her moment. I drifted through the house, testing the limits of my new form. Objects held no substance for me, yet I could feel the currents of emotion flowing through the space. The anxiety radiating from Mother as she checked her phone for news of my body's discreet disposal, the triumph emanating from Rachel as she practiced her vows in front of a mirror. James arrived mid-morning, unaware of the morning's events. I watched him joke with his groomsmen, adjust his tie, and accept congratulations from early arriving guests. No sign of grief or concern crossed his face, no indication that he felt the absence of someone he had once claimed to love. Mother gathered the key players, the inner circle who needed to know enough to maintain the facade. She crafted the story with expert precision, explaining my regrettable but understandable absence. A family emergency out of state, a dear friend in crisis requiring immediate attention. The details remained vague enough to deflect deeper questioning. The irony of my death occurring on my grandmother's death anniversary did not escape me. 2 years apart, the only two people who saw through the family's perfect facade exited their production. But while grandmother received a lavish funeral, public mourning, and a marble headstone, my passing would be hidden away like a shameful secret. As the morning progressed, I discovered new aspects of my spiritual existence. I could move through walls, traverse great distances with a thought, and sense the true emotions behind people's carefully constructed masks. The gift of sight my grandmother had tried to give me in life came naturally in death. The wedding guests began arriving, filling the house with chatter and excitement. I recognized faces from my own life. People who had attended dinners at my apartment, celebrated my achievements, witnessed my relationship with James. They accepted Mother's explanation for my absence with minimal questions, already focused on the celebration to come. Rachel glowed with anticipation as her bridesmaids helped with final adjustments to her hair and makeup. The wedding dress, originally chosen for its perfect fit on my frame, had been altered to suit her figure. She admired herself in the full-length mirror, practicing the serene smile she would wear down the aisle. Mother orchestrated every detail with military precision, ensuring no hint of the morning's tragedy could taint her perfect production. She fielded questions about my absence with practiced ease, her social training allowing her to lie without a flicker of guilt showing on her face. The hours ticked toward the ceremony, and I felt a strange detachment from the proceedings. The pain and betrayal that had driven me to my final act seemed distant now, replaced by a curious desire to witness how they would maintain their carefully constructed facade in the face of what I had done. I followed as they transferred to the church, my spirit form unbound by physical constraints. The wedding party arranged themselves according to Mother's precise instructions, with last-minute adjustments to cover my absence in the processional. Rachel took her place at the back of the church, Father at her side, ready to begin their performance. As the music started and the doors opened, I took my position above the altar, preparing to witness their ultimate act of erasure. In death, as in life, they would write me out of their story. But this time, I would ensure my absence left a mark they couldn't simply cover with fresh paint and pretty lies. From my vantage point near the church's vaulted ceiling, I watched the wedding party arrange themselves with mechanical precision. Rachel radiated triumph as she prepared for her entrance, the train of my wedding dress spread perfectly behind her. Mother fussed with the arrangement one final time before taking her seat in the front pew, her designer outfit carefully selected to photograph well from every angle. The guests filled every pew, their presence a testament to Mother's social influence. I recognized faces from every chapter of my life, now repurposed as witnesses to Rachel's perfect day. My college roommate sat near the back, checking her phone periodically, perhaps wondering why I hadn't responded to her morning text. Former colleagues whispered among themselves, no doubt discussing my conspicuous absence. Being a spirit granted me new perspectives I never had in life. I could sense the undercurrents of emotion flowing through the church like invisible rivers. Beneath Rachel's radiant smile lurked a shadow of anxiety, not about marriage but discovery. Mother's composure masked a deep well of tension as she monitored her phone for updates about my body's discreet handling. James stood at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo, showing no sign that this morning held any significance beyond his wedding day. I drifted closer, studying the face I had once known better than my own. His expression remained serene, unburdened by guilt or grief. Whatever love he claimed to have felt for me had been efficiently packed away with the rest of his inconvenient memories. The organist began the processional, and I felt the familiar notes vibrate through my spectral form. Rachel had chosen the same music I had selected months ago, another piece of my life she had claimed as her own. The wedding party moved down the aisle in perfect synchronization, their steps practiced to match the rhythm exactly as Mother had insisted during rehearsals. As I observed from above, I discovered I could focus my attention to hear specific conversations among the guests. Aunt Patricia whispered to Uncle Robert about my absence, speculating about the real reason behind it. Their suspicions came closer to truth than they realized, but they quickly dismissed such dark thoughts as inappropriate for the occasion. The temperature in the church dropped several degrees as my attention focused on the proceedings. Several guests pulled their jackets closer, attributing the sudden chill to overactive air conditioning. Mother's perfectly coiffed hair stirred in a non-existent breeze, causing her to glance around with the first sign of genuine unease I had seen all day. Rachel floated down the aisle on Father's arm, the picture of bridal perfection, only I could see how her fingers gripped his arm too tightly, how her smile held a brittle edge. She had won her ultimate victory over me, but victory brought its own kind of terror. The fear of discovery, of consequences, lurked beneath her triumphant exterior. The priest began the ceremony, his words about love and devotion ringing hollow in the sacred space. I watched James take Rachel's hands, speaking vows he had once practiced with me. My spirit form vibrated with emotion, causing the candles on the altar to flicker. Several guests crossed themselves, attributing the disturbance to natural drafts. Mother maintained her perfect pose in the front pew, but I could see the toll the morning had taken. Tiny cracks appeared in her makeup where stress had caused her to touch her face too often. Her hands clasped her purse too tightly, knowing it contained my final letter, still unread. The weight of her choices pressed against her carefully constructed facade. The ceremony proceeded according to Mother's meticulous planning, each moment choreographed for maximum effect. Pictures would show a perfect society wedding, with no hint of the tragedy that preceded it. My absence would become a minor footnote, explained away with practiced lies and misdirection. I drifted among the guests, observing their reactions. Some seemed genuinely moved by the ceremony, unaware of the dark undertones. Others showed subtle signs of discomfort, picking up on undercurrents they couldn't quite identify. The atmosphere grew increasingly heavy as my invisible presence filled the space. The stained glass windows cast colored shadows across the proceedings, but where my spirit passed, the light dimmed momentarily. Mother noticed these changes, her society training warring with growing supernatural awareness. Her perfectly maintained smile slipped slightly each time another inexplicable chill swept through the church. Rachel and James exchanged rings, their hands steady despite the dropping temperature. The gold band slid onto her finger, sealing their performance. I watched from above as they sealed their union with a kiss, the guests applauding on cue. The perfect moment Mother had orchestrated played out exactly as planned, despite the morning's complications. As the newlyweds turned to face their audience, I noticed small imperfections in their triumph, smudged slightly from nervous sweating. James's smile held a forced quality that only I seemed to recognize. Mother's hands shook subtly as she stood to applaud, her composure finally showing signs of strain. The wedding party proceeded back down the aisle, but I remained near the altar, watching the guests file out. My former friends followed the crowd, some pausing to wonder aloud about my absence. Their concern touched me, even as I recognized how quickly they would accept whatever explanation Mother provided. In the emptying church, I discovered more abilities in my spirit form. I could sense the residual emotions left behind like fingerprints on glass. Mother's anxiety lingered near her pew. Rachel's triumph colored the altar steps, and James's carefully suppressed guilt tainted the space where he had stood. The transformation from ceremony to reception would happen with mechanical efficiency, guided by Mother's precise timeline. My death had caused only a minor delay in her schedule. A brief disruption quickly smoothed over like a wrinkle in expensive fabric. But my presence would continue to ripple through their perfect day, an invisible current undermining their carefully constructed reality. My spirit form moved freely between spaces, allowing me to witness the behind-the-scenes machinery of their performance. Mother made discreet calls, ensuring my body's proper handling. Rachel touched up her makeup while practicing her camera-ready smile, and James loosened his tie, unaware of the spectral presence observing his every move. The truth of their nature revealed itself in these unguarded moments. Mother's practiced grace cracked when she thought no one watched, showing glimpses of the calculation beneath. Rachel's triumph carried an edge of desperation, a need to convince herself as much as others. James's perfect groom facade slipped occasionally, revealing the man who had participated in this elaborate betrayal. I followed them from the church, my invisible presence casting shadows they couldn't quite explain. The perfect wedding day they had planned would proceed, but my final act ensured it would carry undertones they never anticipated. In death, I had become the witness they could never fully ignore, the truth they could never completely bury. Through my spectral wandering between the church and reception venue, memories of the past 3 months surfaced with crystal clarity. I recalled the exact moment the affair began, though I hadn't recognized it then. It was during one of Rachel's frequent visits to my apartment, when James came to fix the heating system she had mysteriously broken. I had left for work that morning, trusting my sister with my space as I always did. When I returned that evening, something had shifted in the atmosphere. Rachel's smile held a secret edge, and James avoided my eyes more than usual. I dismissed the signs, trained by years of family conditioning to doubt my own perceptions. The truth revealed itself in fragments now, each memory taking on new significance. The way Rachel began appearing at family dinners more frequently after that day. How James started finding excuses to work late on evenings we had planned together. Mother's sudden interest in my relationship, asking pointed questions about our future plans. Their affair blossomed in the spaces I couldn't see, in the moments I trusted them most. While I worked overtime to support the family's lifestyle, they met in expensive hotels charged to the credit card Mother had insisted I maintain for family emergencies. My own money funded their betrayal. Rachel grew bolder as weeks passed, leaving deliberate clues for me to find. A forgotten earring in James's car, her signature perfume lingering in his apartment. Text messages she knew I would accidentally see. Each piece of evidence carefully placed to maximize impact while maintaining plausible deniability. Mother orchestrated their encounters with practiced precision. She arranged family events to throw them together, created opportunities for private conversations, and kept me occupied with endless wedding planning tasks. Her manipulation extended to financial matters, ensuring my resources supported their developing relationship. The engagement announcement had been perfectly timed. Mother chose a family dinner, ensuring maximum dramatic effect. She had seated me facing the entrance, guaranteeing I would see them enter together. Rachel wore my favorite dress, another calculated detail in their performance. James's role in their deception became clearer now. He had played his part with skill, maintaining our relationship while pursuing Rachel. Every kiss, every promise, every shared moment had been part of their elaborate charade. He used my love as cover for his true intentions. The family's financial dependence on me took on new meaning in light of their betrayal. My salary supported not only household expenses but their secret courtship. Restaurant receipts I found in Mother's study revealed intimate dinners for two, charged to accounts I maintained. Shopping sprees disguised as business expenses drained my savings. Mother's careful accounting told its own story. Pages of expenditures in her elegant handwriting detailed how they spent my money. Designer clothes for Rachel, weekend getaways, jewelry that never appeared at family functions, every purchase calculated to build their perfect facade while depleting my resources. The wedding preparations became an extension of their financial exploitation. Vendors charged premium rates for last-minute changes Rachel demanded, knowing I would cover the costs. Mother arranged extravagant details she had deemed unnecessary for my wedding, each one carefully added to accounts in my name. Their betrayal extended beyond money. They systematically dismantled my support system, isolating me from friends and colleagues. Mother spread subtle rumors about my emotional stability, ensuring any future revelations would be dismissed as jealous delusions. Rachel claimed my closest friends as her own, rewriting the history of relationships I had built. James contributed his own form of manipulation. He gaslighted me about Rachel's increasing presence in his life, dismissing my concerns as paranoia. Each time I questioned their closeness, he would remind me of my family's history of anxiety, suggesting therapy rather than honesty. The truth about their relationship emerged in pieces as I drifted through the reception space. Whispered conversations between guests revealed knowledge I never had in life. Apparently, their affair had been an open secret in certain social circles, carefully hidden only from me. Mother's inner circle had helped maintain the deception. Aunt Patricia kept me occupied at family gatherings while Rachel and James slipped away together. Uncle Robert managed the family accounts to obscure their use of my money. Even distant cousins played their parts, providing alibis and diversions as needed. The wedding planning process served as cover for their final preparations. While I selected flowers and tasted cakes, they arranged their future together. Each decision I made for my own wedding became a template for theirs, my choices appropriated and adjusted to suit their narrative. Their manipulation extended to the timing of events. The wedding date, chosen to coincide with my grandmother's death anniversary, served multiple purposes. It prevented me from seeking solace at her grave, eliminated the possibility of a competing memorial service, and ensured maximum emotional impact. The reception venue held evidence of their careful planning. Place cards revealed strategic seating arrangements, separating my potential allies and surrounding key positions with Mother's loyal supporters. The guest list had been curated to exclude anyone who might question the official narrative of events. Even the wedding gifts told a story of deception. Expensive items I had once admired appeared wrapped in elegant paper, now addressed to Rachel and James. My tastes and preferences had been cataloged and repurposed, transformed into elements of their perfect day. Their performance maintained its polish even as my spirit form observed their private moments. Rachel touched up her makeup while rehearsing responses to questions about my absence. James straightened his tie and practiced his camera-ready smile. Mother coordinated with staff, ensuring every detail supported their carefully constructed reality. The weight of their betrayal hung in the air like invisible smoke, detectable only to my spectral senses. Each perfectly arranged flower, each carefully placed decoration represented another piece of my life they had claimed as their own. Their triumph built itself on the foundation of my erasure. In death, I gained the clarity my grandmother had tried to give me in life. Every subtle sign, every dismissed warning, every overlooked detail aligned to reveal the true nature of their deception. They had orchestrated my replacement with the precision of master performers, each playing their role to perfection. The truth of their relationship revealed itself in layers, each more devastating than the last. They had not simply betrayed my trust, they had systematically deconstructed my existence to create space for their own narrative. My death would serve as the final act in their performance, the ultimate erasure they had planned all along. The wedding ceremony unfolded beneath me like a theater production, each moment choreographed to achieve maximum impact. From my position near the church's rafters, I watched James recite his vows with practiced sincerity, his words echoing those he had once whispered to me in private moments. Secure in her victory, though I alone could see how her hands trembled slightly as she held the bouquet. My spectral presence affected the atmosphere in subtle ways. The candles flickered when I drifted too close, casting strange shadows across the altar. The temperature dropped noticeably, causing guests to pull their jackets closer and whisper about drafts. Mother noticed these disturbances, her carefully maintained composure slipping each time another inexplicable chill swept through the church. The priest spoke of love and devotion, his words ringing hollow in the sacred space. I studied the faces of the wedding party, seeing past their polished exteriors to the truths beneath. Rachel's maid of honor shifted uncomfortably, aware of her role in concealing the affair. James's best man avoided looking directly at the couple, his guilt evident in his rigid posture. Guests filled every pew, their presence a testament to Mother's social influence. Former colleagues who had attended my engagement party sat near the back, occasionally glancing around as if expecting to see me. Friends who had witnessed my relationship with James now smiled and took photos, their memories apparently rewritten to accommodate this new narrative. As the ceremony progressed, I discovered I could focus my attention to hear specific conversations among the gathered crowd. Aunt Patricia whispered to Uncle Robert about the strange absence of the other daughter, their speculation coming closer to truth than they realized. Mother's loyal friends exchanged knowing looks, their silence bought with promises of social advancement. The exchanging of rings brought another wave of supernatural disturbance. As James slid the gold band onto Rachel's finger, every candle in the church guttered simultaneously. A cold wind swept through the space, causing the flowers to tremble in their arrangements. Several guests crossed themselves, attributing the phenomenon to divine presence rather than my ghostly interference. Mother maintained her perfect pose in the front pew, but I could see the toll the morning's events had taken. Her makeup, usually flawless, showed signs of stress around her eyes. Her hands gripped her purse too tightly, knowing it contained my final letter, still unread. Each unexplained occurrence caused her to flinch slightly, her society training warring with growing unease. Rachel's triumph carried an edge of desperation as she turned to face the congregation. The wedding dress, altered to fit her frame, suddenly seemed to constrict around her chest. She stumbled slightly during their first kiss as newlyweds, saved from falling only by James's quick reflexes. Small imperfections in their perfect moment, visible to my spectral sight. The wedding party proceeded down the aisle to triumphant organ music, but discordant notes crept into the melody. The organist frowned at his instrument, unable to explain the strange sounds that accompanied the traditional processional. Guests shifted in their seats, sensing something amiss but unable to identify the source of their discomfort. James led his new bride toward the church doors, his confident stride faltering when they passed through a pocket of supernatural cold. Rachel's veil stirred in an unfelt breeze, momentarily obscuring her face. Mother hurried after them, her social mask cracking further with each step. The photographer captured these moments, unknowingly documenting evidence of my presence. Later, they would discover mysterious orbs of light in the official photos, unexplained shadows falling across key moments. Physical proof of my attendance at their perfect ceremony, impossible to edit away. Outside the church, sunshine failed to dispel the atmosphere of unease. The wedding party arranged themselves for photos, their smiles growing strained as equipment malfunctioned inexplicably. Mother supervised the proceedings with increasing agitation, her phone buzzing constantly with updates about my body's discreet handling. Rachel posed with James for their first photos as husband and wife, but each shot captured something slightly wrong. Her veil refused to lay properly. His boutonniere wilted inexplicably, shadows fell oddly across their faces. The photographer grew increasingly frustrated, unable to achieve the perfect images Mother demanded. The guests mingled on the church steps, their conversations a mix of celebration and underlying tension. Those who knew me best seemed affected by my invisible presence, touching their throats as if struggling to breathe when they passed through the spaces where my spirit lingered. Mother's carefully crafted narrative began showing signs of strain. As the wedding party prepared to depart for the reception, I noticed James watching the church doors with an odd expression. For a moment, he seemed to sense my presence, his confidence wavering. Rachel clutched his arm possessively, her triumph tainted by a flash of uncertainty. Mother hurried them toward the waiting cars, eager to maintain her schedule despite the morning's disruption. The truth of their relationship revealed itself in these unguarded moments between ceremony and reception. Each glance, each touch, each careful manipulation of appearances showed the calculation beneath their supposed romance. My death had added an unexpected element to their performance, an invisible audience they could sense but never acknowledge. The perfect wedding they had planned proceeded according to Mother's precise timeline, but my presence ensured it carried undertones they never anticipated. In death, I had become the witness they could never fully ignore, the truth they could never completely bury. Their ceremony of triumph transformed into something darker, marked by supernatural signs they couldn't explain away. The reception venue glittered with carefully curated elegance, every detail selected to create an illusion of perfection. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across tables draped in ivory silk, each centerpiece an exact replica of my original design. Mother moved through the space with increasing agitation, her composure cracking further as she consumed glass after glass of expensive champagne. Rachel held court at the head table, playing her role of radiant bride while casting frequent glances at her phone. The screen remained dark, no messages appearing from the discreet service handling my body. James maintained his perfect groom facade, though his smile grew strained each time the temperature dropped around him. My spiritual presence manifested in increasingly noticeable ways. Wine glasses shattered without being touched, flower arrangements wilted despite the controlled climate, and candles refused to stay lit. The wedding coordinator rushed from crisis to crisis, unable to explain the cascade of small disasters disrupting her perfectly planned event. Mother's drinking progressed as the evening wore on, her social mask slipping with each empty glass. She cornered the wedding coordinator behind a flower arrangement, voice rising as she demanded explanations for the continuing problems. Her perfectly coiffed hair began to loosen, small strands escaping to frame her flushed face. The waitstaff whispered among themselves about strange occurrences in the kitchen. Plates flew off shelves when no one was near. Refrigerator doors opened on their own, and the wedding cake developed mysterious imperfections moments before its scheduled presentation. My invisible influence spread through every aspect of their celebration. Rachel's composure wavered during the father-daughter dance. She stumbled over her own feet when passing through a pocket of supernatural cold, nearly pulling father down with her. The string quartet's music developed an unsettling undertone, notes falling discordant despite the musicians' best efforts. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing something amiss. James watched these events with growing unease, his confident demeanor cracking. During the couple's first dance, he kept glancing over Rachel's shoulder, as if expecting to see someone standing there. Each time they spun through a cold spot, his steps faltered. Muscle memory perhaps recalling other dances with a different partner. The wedding guests responded to the atmosphere in varying ways. Those who knew me best seemed most affected, touching their throats or rubbing their arms when they passed through spaces where my spirit lingered. Mother's inner circle maintained their social smiles while exchanging worried glances, aware of the morning's events but bound by loyalty to keep silent. Aunt Patricia's speech rambled longer than planned, her words slurring slightly as she attempted to praise the perfect couple. She veered dangerously close to mentioning my relationship with James before Mother cut her off, practically pushing her away from the microphone. The moment created a ripple of whispers among the guests, questions forming about the family's strange behavior. The wedding cake presentation became another demonstration of my spectral influence. As Rachel and James posed with the silver knife, the entire top tier suddenly collapsed, sending white fondant cascading down the perfect layers. Mother barely suppressed a scream of frustration, her champagne glass cracking in her grip. Rachel retreated to the bridal suite to repair her makeup, unaware that I followed. She spoke to her reflection in harsh whispers, rehearsing explanations for my absence to curious guests. The mirror fogged inexplicably, causing her to stumble backward into a chair. For the first time, real fear showed through her perfect bride facade. The reception dinner service suffered continuous disruptions. Plates arrived inexplicably cold, and the special dietary meals ended up reversed. The catering staff worked frantically to correct each problem, while Mother's drinking accelerated with every new crisis. James found himself cornered by my former colleagues, their innocent questions about my absence growing more pointed as alcohol loosened tongues. He maintained the official story about my emergency departure, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's chill. Each lie seemed to cost him more effort, his perfect groom persona wearing thin. The wedding photographer struggled to capture the traditional reception moments. Equipment malfunctioned constantly, and when photos did develop, they showed strange anomalies. Shadows fell wrong, mysterious orbs of light appeared near the couple, and Rachel's face blurred in every shot despite multiple attempts. Mother's increasing intoxication began drawing attention from the guests. She argued with the wedding coordinator about the continuing problems, her voice carrying across the reception space. The simple act of cutting the damaged cake became a source of tension, her hands shaking as she tried to salvage the moment for the cameras. Rachel watched her mother's decline with growing alarm, her own composure cracking further. During the bouquet toss, she threw the flowers with too much force, sending them crashing into a champagne tower. The resulting cascade of glass and liquid created chaos among the guests, while Mother stood silent, staring at the destruction with unfocused eyes. The evening proceeded toward its inevitable conclusion, each perfect moment they had planned transforming into something darker. My presence ensured their celebration carried undertones they never anticipated, supernatural signs they couldn't explain away. Their triumph turned hollow, marked by an invisible witness they could never fully ignore. Mother's moment of reckoning began during the reception speeches. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand as she approached the microphone, her perfectly curated facade cracking under the weight of guilt and alcohol. The room fell silent, anticipating the usual elegant toast from the mother of the bride. Instead, they witnessed the beginning of her unraveling. Her speech started normally enough, praising Rachel's accomplishments and welcoming James to the family. But as she continued, her words took an unexpected turn. She spoke of perfect daughters and family expectations, her voice growing increasingly bitter. The guests shifted uncomfortably as she began to ramble about sacrifices and silent burdens. Rachel's face tightened with each word, recognizing the dangerous territory her mother entered. She tried to catch Mother's eye, signaling her to stop, but the older woman seemed beyond reaching. The alcohol had stripped away years of social conditioning, leaving raw truth in its wake. My letter burned in Mother's purse like a physical presence, though she had yet to read it. Her grip on the microphone tightened as she spoke of family loyalty and unspoken agreements. The temperature in the room plummeted as my spirit drew closer, eager to witness this moment of revelation. The facade cracked completely when Mother mentioned my name for the first time that day. She spoke of 2 daughters, one bright and demanding, the other reliable and useful. Her voice broke as she described the weight of maintaining appearances, of building one child's future on another's foundation. James stared at his plate while Mother detailed the careful manipulation of his relationships. She explained how she had orchestrated meetings between him and Rachel, how she had encouraged their betrayal while relying on my financial support. The perfect groom's mask slipped, showing genuine discomfort for the first time. Rachel stood abruptly, her wedding dress rustling as she tried to reach her mother. But Mother waved her away, determined to continue. She described years of systematic exploitation, of using one daughter's resources to fund another's dreams. The microphone picked up every tremor in her voice as she revealed the morning's events. The guests sat in stunned silence as Mother confessed to finding my body, to arranging its discreet removal to prevent disruption to the wedding. Her words slurred slightly, but the truth emerged clear and devastating. She spoke of choosing between daughters, of sacrificing one to ensure the other's perfect day. Aunt Patricia attempted to intervene, reaching for the microphone, but Mother clutched it tighter. She detailed the family's financial dependence on my income, revealing how they had systematically drained my accounts to maintain their lifestyle. The perfect family image she had maintained for decades shattered with each revelation. Rachel's fury manifested in sharp whispers as she finally reached her mother, attempting to guide her away from the microphone. But Mother resisted, determined to complete her confession. She described my grandmother's warnings, acknowledging the truth of her accusations about family dynamics. The wedding coordinator hovered anxiously nearby, uncertain how to handle this deviation from the planned schedule. Mother ignored all attempts to silence her, focused entirely on unburdening herself of years of calculated cruelty. Her makeup ran in dark streams down her face as she finally began to cry. James remained frozen in his seat as Mother exposed his role in their deception. She revealed how he had played both sisters, maintaining our relationship while pursuing Rachel under her guidance. The perfect future son-in-law tarnished before the assembled guests, his calculated manipulation laid bare. The truth about their financial exploitation emerged in detail as Mother continued her confession. She listed the accounts they had drained, the credit cards maxed out in my name, the savings depleted to fund Rachel's lifestyle. The wealthy family facade crumbled as she revealed the extent of their dependence on my income. Rachel's attempts to maintain control failed completely as Mother described the morning's events in graphic detail. The discreet removal of my body, the rapid transformation of my room into a guest space, the calculated decisions to proceed with the wedding, all exposed under the weight of Mother's guilt. The guests reacted with increasing horror as the scope of the family's betrayal became clear. Those who had known me best showed visible distress, while Mother's social circle exchanged alarmed glances. The perfect society wedding transformed into a public confession of years of systematic abuse. Mother finally released the microphone, swaying slightly as the weight of her revelations settled over the room. She reached into her purse with trembling hands, withdrawing my unopened letter. The paper shook as she unfolded it, preparing to read my final words to the assembled guests. Rachel lunged forward, attempting to snatch the letter away, but Mother held firm. Her voice carried clearly as she read my detailed account of their years of manipulation, my understanding of their betrayal, and my final decision to remove myself from their narrative. The perfect daughter's mask cracked completely as she faced the public exposure of her role in my death. The reception dissolved into chaos as Mother finished reading the letter. Guests began leaving in waves, unable to continue celebrating in the face of such revelations. The perfect wedding they had planned transformed into a public acknowledgement of their calculated cruelty, my final revenge delivered through Mother's drunken confession. Mother left the reception hall in a daze, her designer heels clicking unevenly against marble floors as she climbed the stairs to my old bedroom. The space had been efficiently stripped of my presence that morning, transformed into an impersonal guest room, but traces of my life lingered in the air. She stumbled through the doorway, her champagne glass finally slipping from trembling fingers to shatter on the hardwood floor. The guests below continued their exodus from the ruined reception, their shocked whispers carrying through the vents. Mother ignored the chaos she had created, focusing instead on the medicine cabinet in my private bathroom. She pulled bottles from shelves with shaking hands, reading labels through tears that smeared her expensive mascara. My spirit followed her movements with growing awareness of her intentions. The perfect society matriarch who had orchestrated decades of manipulation now faced the consequences of her choices alone. Her confession had destroyed the facade she spent a lifetime building, leaving her stripped of the control she valued above all else. Rachel's voice carried up the stairs, sharp with panic as she searched for her mother. The perfect bride's composure had cracked completely, her wedding dress catching on banisters as she rushed through the house. James followed more slowly, his practiced charm replaced by genuine uncertainty as he faced the collapse of their carefully constructed narrative. Mother locked the bedroom door, her hands steady for the first time since her speech began. She lined up pills on the marble bathroom counter, arranging them with the same precision she had used to plan Rachel's perfect wedding. Each tablet represented a year of calculated cruelty, of choosing one daughter's dreams over another's survival. The wedding coordinator tried unsuccessfully to maintain order downstairs, her professional manner cracking as guests demanded explanations she couldn't provide. Aunt Patricia's voice rose above the general chaos, attempting to smooth over the scandal with practiced society lies. But Mother's confession had been mere drunken ramblings. Rachel finally reached the bedroom door, her fists pounding against wooden panels as she begged her mother to open it. The perfect daughter facade dissolved completely, revealing the desperation beneath. She called for James to help break down the door, but he remained frozen at the bottom of the stairs, unable to face this final act in their performance. Inside the bathroom, Mother methodically swallowed pills, chasing each one with sips of water from a crystal glass. Her movements carried the same elegant precision she had used to orchestrate my erasure, each gesture a testament to years of rigorous social training. Even in this final act, she maintained the appearance of control. The family's security team arrived, summoned by the wedding coordinator's frantic calls. They approached the bedroom with professional detachment, preparing to breach the locked door. Rachel's pleas grew more hysterical as she realized the full implications of her mother's actions. The perfect wedding dissolved into a scene of undeniable tragedy. My spirit moved freely through the locked door, watching Mother slide down the bathroom wall to sit on imported tiles. Her designer dress spread around her like wilting flower petals, the fabric she had selected to photograph perfectly now wrinkled beyond repair. She clutched my letter in one hand, finally reading the words she had ignored that morning. The security team broke through the bedroom door with practiced efficiency, but their entrance came too late. Mother had choreographed this final act as precisely as she had planned the wedding, timing each moment for maximum impact. Rachel's scream echoed through the house as she found her mother unconscious on the bathroom floor. Paramedics arrived minutes later, their urgent movements a sharp contrast to the elegant wedding atmosphere that had filled the house hours before. They worked over Mother's still form with professional focus, ignoring Rachel's increasingly hysterical demands for information. James remained downstairs, speaking quietly with police officers who responded to the security team's calls. The perfect society wedding transformed into a scene of emergency vehicles and uniformed personnel. Guests who lingered watched from manicured gardens as Mother was carried out on a stretcher, her carefully selected mother of the bride outfit hidden beneath medical equipment. Rachel followed the paramedics to their ambulance, her wedding dress stained with bathroom floor water and smeared makeup. My spirit observed it all from above, watching the family's carefully constructed facade crumble completely. Mother's public confession and suicide attempt stripped away decades of manipulation and lies, revealing the dark truth beneath their perfect surface. In the end, she chose a final, dramatic gesture to acknowledge the weight of her choices. The wedding venue emptied slowly, shell-shocked guests departing in waves as police conducted preliminary interviews. James spoke with detectives, his perfect groom demeanor cracking as he explained the morning's events. The truth he had helped conceal emerged in clinical detail, each statement contributing to the complete collapse of their carefully maintained narrative. Mother survived her suicide attempt, but the woman who emerged from the hospital bore little resemblance to the polished society matriarch she once was. The psychiatric ward became her new stage, her audience now limited to medical staff and carefully screened visitors. Her perfect facade crumbled permanently, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger who spoke constantly of guilt and ghosts. Rachel and James's marriage collapsed before they returned from their abbreviated honeymoon. The weight of public scandal and private guilt proved too heavy for their carefully constructed relationship. James moved out of their designer apartment within weeks, his perfect husband persona abandoned along with the luxury items they had purchased using my credit cards. The financial truth emerged in waves of legal documents and frozen accounts. Mother's careful accounting revealed years of systematic exploitation, each transaction building toward my eventual erasure. The family fortune proved largely fictional, built on debt and manipulation. Rachel watched her carefully curated lifestyle dissolve as creditors claimed their due. Former friends and colleagues came forward with stories they had previously kept silent. Each revelation added another crack to the family's perfect image. Tales of manipulation, witnessed betrayals, and ignored warnings painted a picture of calculated cruelty spanning decades. The society circles Mother had cultivated turned away, eager to distance themselves from public scandal. Father retreated into his work, avoiding the aftermath of his family's collapse. His office became a refuge from the reporters who discovered the story's potential for sensational headlines. The perfect family man image he had maintained dissolved under journalistic scrutiny, revealing a passive enabler of years of abuse. Rachel attempted to maintain some semblance of her previous life, but doors closed firmly in her face. The fashion industry contacts she had cultivated proved temporary, their support dependent on Mother's social influence. Without financial backing and family connections, her design aspirations withered like flowers in frost. James faced his own professional consequences as the story spread. Clients withdrew from his firm, uncomfortable with the publicity surrounding his role in the scandal. The perfect future he had planned with Rachel disappeared along with his carefully maintained reputation. His calculated betrayal returned to haunt him in unexpected ways. Mother's social circle scattered like leaves in autumn wind. The loyal friends who had helped maintain their facade for decades now denied any knowledge of wrongdoing. Aunt Patricia checked herself into a spa retreat, conveniently unavailable for police interviews. Uncle Robert retired abruptly, citing health concerns as he moved to a distant state. The family home, once a showcase of their supposed wealth, stood empty and neglected. Creditors claimed artwork and antiques, stripping away layers of carefully curated perfection to reveal cheap substitutes beneath. The garden my grandmother had lovingly tended withered without care, its decline a physical manifestation of the family's fall. Rachel made one attempt to visit Mother in the psychiatric facility, but the meeting ended badly. The perfect daughter facade cracked completely when faced with her mother's unfiltered truth. She left in tears, her designer handbag stuffed with prescriptions Mother had refused to take, her final attempt at control thwarted by hospital security. James sought professional help, claiming trauma from his involvement in the family's dysfunction. His therapist's notes, later subpoenaed for civil proceedings, revealed a calculated manipulator struggling to maintain his self-image as victim rather than perpetrator. The perfect husband persona proved difficult to abandon, even in confidential sessions. The legal consequences mounted as investigators unraveled years of financial manipulation. Credit card companies filed charges, tax authorities launched investigations, and former business associates initiated lawsuits. The perfect society family became a cautionary tale of fraud and exploitation, their fall documented in court records and newspaper headlines. Mother's hospital room became her final stage, her audience limited to psychiatric staff and legal representatives. She spoke constantly of seeing my spirit, claiming supernatural revenge for years of calculated cruelty. The perfect society matriarch disappeared entirely, replaced by a woman who flinched at shadows and whispered apologies to empty air. Rachel's attempt to rebuild her life failed as thoroughly as her marriage. Employment opportunities vanished once potential employers researched her background. The perfect daughter narrative she had maintained proved worthless without Mother's social influence supporting it. She retreated to a small apartment paid for by distant relatives, her designer wardrobe sold to cover basic expenses. The family's collapse seemed complete, their perfect facade stripped away to reveal the rot beneath. My death and Mother's public confession triggered an avalanche of consequences they never anticipated. In seeking to erase me, they orchestrated their own destruction, their carefully maintained narrative crushed under the weight of exposed truth. My spirit lingered near my grandmother's grave, watching autumn leaves dance across the marble headstone. In death, as in life, she provided the only peace I could find. The cemetery remained quiet, undisturbed by the scandal that had torn apart the family she once warned me about. Mother remained in the psychiatric facility, her perfect society manners replaced by paranoid whispers and constant fear. The doctors diagnosed various conditions, prescribed countless medications, but nothing could erase the guilt that haunted her days and nights. She spoke often of seeing me in mirrors and shadows, her carefully constructed reality finally shattered beyond repair. Rachel moved to a distant city, attempting to rebuild her life far from the whispers and pointed fingers that followed our family name. Her designer wardrobe sold at consignment shops, her social media presence deleted, her perfect daughter persona abandoned like a snake shedding unwanted skin. Last reports placed her working retail, her dreams of fashion design buried alongside her marriage. James threw himself into rehabilitation of his public image, claiming carefully crafted press releases. The perfect husband facade cracked further with each attempt at reinvention. Clients continued to distance themselves, his professional reputation tarnished beyond recovery by his role in the scandal. Father retreated permanently into his work, his office becoming both refuge and prison. The perfect family man image he had maintained dissolved completely, revealing the hollow shell beneath. He avoided visiting Mother in the hospital, his absence speaking louder than any words could about the reality of their marriage. The family home stood empty, its rooms echoing with memories of calculated cruelty and careful manipulation. Creditors claimed most of the contents, stripping away layers of pretense to reveal the fiction of their wealthy lifestyle. The garden my grandmother had tended withered and died, much like the facade she had always seen through. My spirit found a strange peace in witnessing their separate paths of destruction. The perfect family image they had sacrificed me to maintain crumbled under the weight of exposed truth. Each member walked alone now, haunted by choices they could never undo and consequences they never anticipated. The society circles that once celebrated their perfection now whispered different stories. Tales of manipulation and abuse replaced carefully crafted lies about family loyalty. Mother's former friends analyzed past interactions with new understanding, recognizing signs they had chosen to ignore. The perfect facade they had all maintained dissolved in the harsh light of reality. My final letter, read aloud at what should have been Rachel's perfect wedding reception, continued to circulate in copied form. Each reading revealed new layers of calculated cruelty, new evidence of systematic exploitation. The truth I had carried in life spread further in death than I could have imagined. Sometimes my spirit visited Mother in the psychiatric facility, watching her speak to empty air and flinch at shadows. The perfect society matriarch disappeared completely, replaced by a woman broken by guilt and fear. Her carefully maintained control shattered, leaving her adrift in a reality she could no longer manipulate. Rachel's new life bore no resemblance to the future she had planned. The perfect daughter lived in a small apartment, worked long hours for minimal pay, and avoided mirrors that might reflect the truth of what she had become. Her attempts to contact former friends met with polite rejection, her social circle contracted to nothing. James married again 2 years later, a quiet ceremony lacking the spectacle of his wedding to Rachel. His new wife knew nothing of his past. His perfect husband persona rebuilt on carefully constructed lies. I watched him maintain his facade, knowing the truth would eventually surface as it always did. The cemetery provided refuge in death as my grandmother had in life. Her presence lingered in the careful arrangements of flowers other visitors left, in the peace that surrounded her final resting place. Together, we witnessed the long-delayed consequences of choices made and paths taken, the perfect family facade finally revealing the truth beneath. My spirit found satisfaction not in their destruction but in the exposure of truth. The careful lies they had maintained, the manipulation they had practiced, the cruelty they had inflicted, all laid bare for the world to see. In death, I achieved what I never could in life, breaking free from their narrative to reveal the reality they had worked so hard to hide. Time passed differently for spirits, moments blending into years as I watched their separate stories unfold. The perfect family image they sacrificed everything to maintain disappeared completely, leaving only scattered remnants of their carefully constructed facade. In its place, truth bloomed like flowers in my grandmother's garden, revealing every dark secret they thought forever buried.